whatever you want to capture. Hey. We always try to connect with people that maybe want to host events too. So no, this is just, this is kind of like our welcoming office. But yeah, we have kind of books that we always have available for sale. If they're things that we produced, usually the cost just covers whatever it costs us to like print it. And some of these are eco-produced, some of these are just resources that we think are really valuable. We have our farm tour hats over there, so if you want to grab a hat, you can. So this is Patrick. Patrick's our director. So it's Jeffrey. So I think that's maybe like 3 or 4 hectares. When we got this property, it was pretty degraded. I mean, there were the fish ponds, but the soil itself around the area was pretty degraded, so we really had to build it up. And we actually dug some of the fish ponds deeper, as you'll see, and we moved that property to fill in some other fish ponds, so we had growing area. That is probably ghost pepper. So yeah, we grow these mainly for use as a natural pesticide. This is a type of amaranth. Ghost pepper, yeah, so it's extremely spicy. Like we use it to make a spray that we spray on our plants. That's asparagus. So as you can probably see, like most of the things we grow here are grown for seed. So that's why the asparagus is all, beyond when you'd normally harvest it. So as you're walking around, some of the plants are gonna be like dried up or dead or whatever, and that's because we're saving the seed. I'll point out the ponds and then we'll go back over to this building over here, which we have some of our, what we call appropriate technology. So these are vegetable ferns in here. That looks like a type of cucumber actually, yeah. So again, because we're growing it for seed, it looks, it's like big and yellow and you wouldn't want to eat it, right? But that's kind of our main focus, I would say, with the stuff that we grow on the farm. It's for our seed bank or for seed production. That's just to make sure that the nutrients are fully being absorbed by the seeds and that you're harvesting them at the right time so that they can produce the best quality crop for the grower who's using them on their farm. Yeah. So we have ponds that we pull from for irrigation. So actually this pond right here is kind of dried up to the point that we're not using it anymore, but that back pond, and there's actually a pond on the other side of kind of that building structure over there on the right side. So we'll pump water directly from our reservoir ponds. Just because of where we are, we also have irrigation canals that the province uses to allow rice farmers to irrigate through the dry season and grow rice. So we are also able to tap into the reservoirs during the dry season. That's very good. Yeah, so they have actually a few dammed rivers in the Chiang Mai province that they have reservoirs, and then they funnel those into the canals and distribute it throughout the area. Yeah, it's just water drainage. So obviously that's a big part of it too. You want to make sure, because we do get a heavy rainfall during the rainy season. It's not just about capturing water, it's about making sure that it drains from the areas that we're growing into. That's part of the reason why we have elevated beds, because we do have that kind of extreme wet and extreme dry time of the year. So in the dry time of the year, we're still able to concentrate a lot of organic matter in these beds, and that way it holds moisture well when it's combined with the drip irrigation and mulching. But then in the wet season, it's raised up, so we don't have an issue, or we don't have as much of an issue with plants getting what we call wet feet or soggy feet. The roots aren't just sitting in water, and that's where a lot of the drainage just kind of directs the water to our holding ponds. Ponds, ideal for irrigation. Right now, I think I think it would be better if we had a little more tree coverage around them. We're still kind of building up as you can see, the soil quality is pretty rough on the perimeter of the beds, but we have built up kind of an agroforestry strip along the back that kind of buffers us from the neighboring rice fields. Ideally, and you can see that we have some erosion cover. I think we may have like perennial peanut growing on some of the banks to help prevent erosion. We also have vetiver grass growing on the right side here, and that's to help with erosion. And vetiver grass has like extremely deep roots, so it's gonna really lock the soil in pretty far down, and it also helps purify water. You can actually create floating rafts, and if you protect the root system, you can grow vetiver directly in ponds too, and it helps kind of purify the water. Yeah, so we continued to carry on the fish farming tradition a little bit, kind of like a low input, low yield system. It's not super low yield, but we don't actively farm it to max out our yields. It's just kind of like, yeah, we have ponds, we grow tilapia in them, and we occasionally harvest from them. It allows us to still trial things like different fish feeds and stuff like that, but it's not a main focus of ours. But you can see there's certainly fish in there. They seem that they're healthy. This is one source of irrigation. Obviously, rain feeding into this accounts for some of the water. Like I said, the canals in the surrounding area, we're also able to divert some water from into here. There are a lot of pesticides that are used in some of the surrounding rice fields, so we do have to be careful about pulling water in from canals because it can be contaminated. So on our farm, we don't use any chemicals outside of like natural chemicals we extract from plants, or we use we'll sometimes use like pheromone traps for insects. So we try to, we implement integrated pest management. That doesn't mean that we're so we actually I'll show you, you can see from here, but there's a yellow card at the end of one of those beds, and then you can see a bottle that has yellow coating on it. So those both have like glue applied, the color combined with a pheromone that we buy. It attracts kind of key pests. So some of the bottles are filled with like a vinegar, or sometimes we'll do some type of ethanol with some kind of like attractant in there as well. You can see different ones kind of hanging at different parts of the farm, even from here. One of the reasons why we use like the traps, whether it's pheromone or using something sweet or like a vinegar or something to draw them in, is just because it's a pretty low impact pest control. It's a pretty easy first step. So if you've identified a pest that's like ravaging your crops, then you're going to want to go to something that's probably pretty specific to that pest. But if you're just trying to kind of reduce general pests, or even specific ones, the pheromone can be very specific to a certain pest. But just because we don't have to apply anything to actual plants when you use traps, that's often like an earlier step in the integrated pest management approach. And I wouldn't say we're necessarily it's not like we're certified organic. I think we'd probably be open to using non-organic pesticides if we had to, but obviously our goal is to have as low of an impact on the environment as possible and as low of a cost as possible. So I think one thing that a lot of people don't think about is pesticides are expensive, right? So I think one thing I really like about integrated pest management is it encourages you to actually consider how much damage your crops can take before it would financially make sense to bring in a treatment. Because sometimes you might actually not be losing or getting that much of an impact from a pest that it justifies purchasing something to treat it. You might be losing money if you do that. As long as you're taking steps to increase biodiversity in your area and hopefully prevent major outbreaks of pests, some pest presence is okay. we always say we don't really intend to eliminate pests. We just intend to reduce them below a threshold that we can tolerate. So you could have a pest that actually attacks the seeds even, especially obviously once you get into storage, but it might be something where like a pest could, you could get a disease or some type of pest that once you get your seeds into storage, that could damage your seeds as well. If it's a pest that's going after the leaves, let's say, or the fruit maybe, is that gonna reduce the quality of the seed? And yeah, it absolutely can. So in the same way that if we don't have adequate nutrients in our soil, that's gonna impact the quality of the seed too. So we wanna be growing our seed crops in the best conditions possible, because that's going to carry over for the health of the seed and then future generations that are planted out. When you're growing for seed, the other thing is your crops are in the ground longer. So you kind of have to have a good pest strategy in place, because you just have that much more time to have to defend your plant. That's kind of the overview of the irrigation and a little bit about the IPM that we use. Yeah, so they probably gathered these mainly for composting. We have a composting station nearby. But yeah, you can certainly use leaves for mulching as well. Rice straw as well for mulching. I like using leaves for mulching. I'd say one drawback can be they can blow around more easily, and then two, you have to make sure that they don't have like a high tannin concentration. So some, I don't know about here what specific tree species, but where I'm from in the States, you wouldn't want to mulch with like black walnut, because the leaves will actually like kill your plants. So in here we have a banana run, and you'll see bananas over here as well. We're actually kind of started like a germplasm, or like a gene bank of different banana varieties. So there are different varieties of bananas. No, we don't even do tissue culture. It's just kind of like, because bananas, we typically don't propagate them by seed. We can't, bananas do propagate by seed, but most of the modern cultivars that we have don't. So you can't store seed in a seed bank. So the way that you have to preserve the different varieties is by literally having them just growing on your farm. So it's kind of like a living just cycle of preserving different varieties. So we do that with bananas, and we also do that with bamboo. Bamboo also goes to seed, but typically we just have bamboo, different culms of bamboo that we just make sure are being propagated over time, and that's a way to preserve those genetics and different varieties. So in here, yeah, I think we sometimes will rotate animals in to graze. This is kind of our composting station. At a given time, we might have, like, we used to just have another big pile here that they recently took out for use on the farm. But you can kind of see different stages even in here. So they'll turn it over. They mix in manure from, we have cows on the farm and pigs and chickens. You can see that like this compost pile, we've used a lot of rice hull as kind of a carbon source. The one in the back there has kind of some larger palm branches and things incorporated into it. It's going to take longer for that to break down. We do harness microorganisms from the soil on the farm, and we use those in a number of practices on the farm. Composting, we also put them into what we call our deep litter bedding systems for the pigs. We use it to kind of reduce smell, to sometimes pre-digest things that are going into our compost, and to just kind of, yeah, help break down, really a lot of it's breaking down smells and things that could lead to pest problems later. Yeah, and then we have chippers. We often will chip things like these larger branches to help the compost break down faster. Yeah, chippers are very helpful. I mean, obviously it's a little bit of a luxury, but even if you don't have one, cutting things up with a machete. So we're gonna actually head this way, and then we'll walk past the animals at the end. Yeah, we have some mushrooms popping up. It's a good sign, right? So we do water our compost pile, break down faster as well. You can see that pile is partially covered with black plastic. Ideally, having your compost piles in shade, that's partly why we have that structure in general, and having them moist. Yeah, these are jack beans.
A what? A jack bean?
Jack bean, yeah. So jack beans are really great nitrogen fixers. They
Just the farming or for
it's I'd say its main value is as a green manure cover crop, but you can use it for feed. There's a sprinkler system that we quick threw in for. This is a plot that was pretty degraded that we're trying to build up again a little bit. The reason we did this instead of a drip is just because of the size of this particular field. You could do drip irrigation on this field, but we also knew we were going to be, so you can see there are quite a number of weeds, it has to be weeded, but I just did strips of jack bean, and one of the things about jack bean is it actually suppresses weeds around it. So you can see that the rows that have jack bean growing in it, there's not a lot of weed pressure, whereas the rows that we had soybean, which we pulled some out already, but we had soybean, you can see that there's a lot more weed pressure. Obviously this is with actually this had one weeding in the soybeans and 0 weedings in the jack bean already. And part of that's just because of the jack bean itself. It suppresses kind of some of the ability of other plants to grow around it. If you want to use the beans for an animal feed, it's really high protein, but you have to process the beans in some way to deal with some of the toxin levels in them. So this is an area that we've used for biochar demonstrations. Mainly we use bamboo. We also use kind of some of the branches from palms on the farm, or from or even like the coconut husks and things like that. And then we use branches that we've trimmed from fruit trees. We also have some eucalyptus that we've used for to make biochar as well. This was kind of a cooking stove area, but it's a little jumbled right now because of the event we have going on. We kind of like shoved everything here so that we could make more room for people to spectate and view the biochar production. Let's see what we got. Yeah, so we make biochar out of different things. So this would be, yeah, exactly. This would be a rice hull,
So
and then this looks like it's made from wood. Yeah, to some extent, it's a matter of like what you have, what you have the most of, as far as what we call a feed stock. So whatever you have that you could potentially make biochar out of, yeah. So if you had like larger charcoal like this, you'd have to break it up quite a bit more. This obviously it's smaller, but you can see that there's you have to. The amount of time it takes to make biochar out of different feedstocks is different. So with rice hulls, it's fast in comparison. You do have the challenge of making sure that there's enough space in between where it actually burns. Otherwise, sometimes it can pack so tight that it's hard to make biochar out of rice hulls. But yeah, you can see some of these have turned to ash. So you gotta be like pretty quick with the timing. But it's great. A lot of people use rice husks as the biochar source.
Rice mills, so
yeah, and it works well. So we have different kilns. Like I said, they're all kind of shoved in a corner here because we've been pulling them and putting them back out for different demos. But this is like what we call a Kontiki kiln. Yeah, you can use coconut husks. So these are actually, this is biochar made from the shell of a coconut. Yeah, so biochar has, you can use it for a number of different things. Really, you're making like a high quality charcoal essentially. So you're trying to, you're using pyrolysis, which is basically like you're converting your feedstock into a charcoal source in like very low oxygen environment. Basically, you're making sure that most of what you have as an input turns into like a high carbon output. Okay, so the more carbon you have in it, the better. If you're using a kiln that's efficient, you're not risking it turning into like ash, which would be where you've actually burned a lot of the carbon. Like there are some benefits from ash, but really like this high quality charcoal stage is a much more valuable stage. So this is one kiln model. This is what's called a kontiki kiln. It's a more basic kiln where you're actually using the fire itself to prevent oxygen from getting to whatever you're trying to turn into charcoal. Nope. So this is just to protect the biochar. Normally you wouldn't have this. So you would fill the base with, in this case, coconut husks, and then some kindling to maybe get the fire started. You start the flame. It's gonna create a fire that's burning the top matter, and then that flame is gonna actually act to prevent oxygen from coming in direct contact with whatever you're trying to convert to charcoal. So then it's gonna be a low oxygen environment. So you don't wanna overfill it, because then, like, if you filled it up to here, then more oxygen would be coming in, and it wouldn't be very efficient. But you keep it maybe like, half filled or something, and you can create the biochar using this kind of more open system, but you have to have these sides. Any way you can kind of reduce oxygen coming into your burning system is great. To some extent, people are interested in these just so they can crank up more volume. You pour water, and using water actually can be a good thing for creating like a highly porous biochar, because when the water hits that charcoal, it kind of, there's all sorts of like expanding that happens, and it helps create a lot of the porous structure. So especially if you're wanting to use it for like purification of like water, like we have a water filter system that we have a biochar component to. And this one is more of an enclosed system that we can actually use to collect some of the liquid that comes off of it as well. So we collect it, and you can separate out like what we call wood vinegar or liquid smoke from it, and we can use that as a pesticide as well. Yeah, that's how we make the wood vinegar. So essentially this, it runs the smoke through kind of this cooling chamber, and then we can collect liquid off of that. And this one has like insulation on the outside. So this one we would use to create maybe like a higher quality biochar. And then we have more basic T-lud kilns. Yeah, everything's kind of, like I said, in different places because we just had these workshops. But they're all out here, which is good. You can kind of see the variety. But with the, it's still a little hot. Yeah, with the, you can see their rice husks in this one. But with this system, we would have like a chimney on the top, and we would put like 2 beams underneath here to kind of lift up the top a little bit, and that just allows some gas inflow at the very top to allow the fire to kind of continue, and also to help burn off some of the gases that are going on here. There's something about the airflow that kind of directs it into the right places to burn it off. With a T-lud system, you're basically putting all your stock in the barrel, you're creating a fire on the top, and then you're restricting oxygen to it. And then as it burns down, really the oxygen is going to be suppressed, because what you're trying to turn into charcoal is kind of like below the active fire again. Kind of a similar deal to like what you get with the kontiki setup, where you get this kind of flame curtain that's preventing like too much oxygen from getting into your feed source. And you can actually see it, or actually you can visualize how far it's burned down by taking water and just throwing it on the side. And if it sizzles and steams, you'll see where that kind of fire is in the process of going down your barrel. And then when it gets to the bottom, then you douse it with water again, or you snuff it out. So these are actually stove systems. So these would be using kind of some similar ideas where you're trying to burn off the actual gases in smoke in the process of, in this case, cooking. So we have a few things going on over here. This used to be kind of our, this used to be an area where they had tanks for the rearing of fish. Then we changed it into kind of a pig area, but now we've moved our pig system to the back so that we don't have as much contact with people, and reduces the risk of disease transmission for our livestock. But yeah, you called it. This is a black soldier fly. production. So we have the adults in here. This is where we would put little chambers for them to lay eggs in. I think it's literally just like cardboard that are kind of stacked with little separators. And then we can collect those eggs and move them into the other screened room, which we'll walk past in the back there. And we actually put the eggs into kind of these containers where they have a food source, and we can kind of monitor their growth. You can do really low, kind of low involvement systems where the black soldier flies will actually like crawl up at a certain stage and can crawl out of the container directly into whatever you're feeding the chickens. We're showing a more like intensive way of raising them where you collect them at kind of their optimal like protein point for feed. So we harvest them a little bit before that stage. This is kind of like an appropriate technology section too. When we don't have a major biochar event going on, we would have our biochar kiln set up over here. That's a biogas tank. We've moved our biogas stuff back towards where the pigs are currently housed. We figured biochar production with large containers of biogas probably wasn't the smartest pairing. So the biochar, you can inoculate your biochar with different things. So basically biochar is creating this high quality charcoal that you either use to pull chemicals out of something, like in the case of a water filtration setup, or you put like nutrients or microbes or both into it and then work it into your field. And you're getting the benefit of like increased carbon in your field, and then that kind of slow release of nutrients and housing for microbes. So in this case, we've got some fermented liquids that you could use these just as they are for your growing systems, or you can actually soak biochar in them. So this is like fish amino acids are essentially like fish emulsion. And so this is like a great protein source and great source of nitrogen. That would be something that would be a really good liquid that you could soak your biochar in. Often people will mix it with their compost or mix it with manure or like a manure tea. If you were to just apply like raw biochar into your field, it'll actually pull nutrients out of your field. So you don't want to do that unless you're not planning to plant in the field for like a couple of years or something like that, because eventually it'll balance out. If you have like a large barrel, sometimes we'll tie the biochar in like a mesh. We'll kind of create like a mesh bag for the biochar, and then we can like soak that into the container. That way it's easy to just pull out. Often we just mix biochar in with our compost and then let it mature over time. It takes more time if you do it that way, but it's also less effort. So typically we just mix it in with our compost. But yeah, if you're wanting to like use it quickly or inoculate it with specific things, then soaking it in like a barrel with like a mesh bag is a pretty good way to do it. With the soaking system, if you have microbes that are involved, you want to make sure you aerate it too. Yeah, like you have something that's pumping water into the bottom of your liquid, because otherwise if you have like if you have a microbe that needs oxygen to survive and you're putting it into a liquid tank for a long time, then those microbes will die. If they're anaerobic, like if you have some kind of fermented thing, then that's a different story. But with nutrients, it's more straightforward. You can just kind of soak it. Okay, so these are 50-gallon drums that we've used to create kind of like a simple but effective biosand filter combined with a charcoal filter. This actually came from another organization that we work with called Aqueous Solutions. If you go to their website, aqsolutions.org, they have manuals that show how to create these step by step. But they're pretty simple. We've set them up in a number of communities. The first tank, you can see in these pictures too, it kind of mirrors what we have going on. But that first tank is that the first tank or is this? Sorry, this is the first tank. It's split from the image on there. But the first tank is where water gets pumped into. It's a settling tank, so you just have that filled up with like larger stones and gravel. And then that is able to pump water into the next tank, which has like more of a traditional biosand setup. So you have, again, gravel at the bottom and sand at the top. And it's the same idea that's behind any biosand filter. You're wanting a layer of kind of competitive microbes to build up in the top of the sand. And that's gonna eventually act as a barrier for pathogens going beyond that this kind of layer of, I don't know, film, or it's kind of like, it basically creates this ultra fine filter, really, that's made up of living organisms and kind of whatever those living organisms produce. So that's gonna naturally filter things out, and then that'll go down through the gravel layer, and then that can go on to the next tank. Kind of as we pull water from there, it allows more water to move through the system. So how much water you're using is an important part of this filter actively working. You can pump it with rainwater, you could do it with river water, anything. So that settling tank is gonna help kind of filter out some of the physical contaminants. So if you have like a muddy water source or something like that, hopefully that first layer helps filter out some of that. The biosand filter is going to be largely for like biological pathogens, and then the component that I think is more unique about this setup, the biochar section, is acting it's acting like our activated charcoal would act in like a camping water filter or something like that. So that's able to pull out kind of some odors, but more importantly, it's able to pull out chemical contaminants, which are becoming more of an issue as we use more and more chemicals in the world.
The biochar, you can use the one that coconut.
You could, yeah. I think any works as long as you're making sure that's a high quality product. So you're probably going to want to use a kiln that does a good job of preventing oxygen from getting in with your
Do you have to powder it
your
before you
feedstock.
serve it?
Yeah, you want to still break it up into like a smaller, because I know we think of like, oh, there's so many pores in here, but the pores we're really talking about are like microscopic level. So even breaking it up pretty finely, you're really just increasing surface area to those pores. So you're kind of increasing the. We just literally like take things and just grind it up. I think there are different ways you could accomplish that same thing. When you set it up initially, it takes a few days to get all of the charcoal residue out of here and to get all like the dust from the sand and things. So there's a process to like washing the components that go into here. And then the last thing is just like a storage tank. Yeah, you can turn it on. I mean, the water that goes into it is not that dirty to begin with in this system. So that's kind of one of the ways that we use biochar outside of like directly integrating into farm fields. This is the other room where kind of the next stage for the black soldier flies. I'm not going to actually show it to you, but we have little bins that have food scraps and things in it. This shows our deep layer pig system. So I think this is probably the case in the Philippines too. In Thailand, a lot of people raise their pigs in more confined setups. I'd love it if we could like have our pigs like out in big pastures, but a lot of people have land constraints. And I think having them in a deep bedding system is a nice way to kind of allow the pigs to do some of the things they would do in nature, like rut around in the soil instead of having a concrete bottom. So it's better for the pigs, and it really helps with kind of the smell that you would be normally off-putting with like a pig raising system. So it's a layering of soil that we get from our environment, and rice hulls, biochar. We actually put manure in there as well, and a thin layer of salt. And basically you're kind of creating, and we add IMO. So those indigenous microorganisms that we collected from kind of a healthy soil area on the farm. So basically you're creating this environment that that will break down some of the microorganisms that would normally feed on things like the pig urine and the pig feces. And you're kind of locking in some of the things like ammonia or some of the things that cause smell into the biochar layer and the rice hulls. And the pigs can kind of rut around in it, and then whenever you're done with them being housed in that unit, you can then compost this and use it as compost on your farm. So it's kind of a cool system. We'll walk back by the animals, but I'm not gonna like bring you into the animals again for just the safety of the animals themselves. Yeah, hygiene. So we actually recently did an experiment with some of the pig feed. Oh yeah, so this is some material that we put out. So I think I mentioned earlier that we harvest the larva at a slightly earlier stage than when they crawl naturally out of the containers. And that's just to get kind of the optimal amount of protein in them. Certainly you can still use them if you have a system where they naturally crawl out, they're still very valuable as a feed. We're just trying to showcase a system where if you wanted to produce really high quality black soldier fly larvae for your own system or to sell to other people, this might be a better way to get kind of like optimum protein levels. Different stages of raising larvae. I think we also have we have beetles that we're also raising for larvae. So different types of larval feed. Yeah, we do. So we recently did one. I think this is a lot of the, these are some of the older black soldier flies. There's some pupas in there. We recently cut the amount of fish meal that we're putting into our pig feed in half and substituted it with black soldier fly larvae, and we had the same weight gain in both groups. So if you are producing a lot of black soldier fly larvae, you can sub it in as a protein source pretty freely as needed with some of the on-farm feeds that you create. We don't have a lot going on right now with it. I think they took a break because they were just doing a lot of production for that experiment. So now we just kind of wrap that up. But you can see we freeze. We'll freeze our black soldier fly larvae. You can also dry them. This is the black soldier fly larvae. So they turn dark when you freeze them. So we can dry these out, or you can dry them out instead of freezing them and use them in feed, or you can just feed them. You can feed them right after you're done harvesting them from your system or after they're frozen. It's just a way that we can kind of preserve larger volumes for a longer period of time. I know like freezing isn't realistic for everybody, but for us, just having a small one is good. But some of our feed inputs are like, we'll buy things and mix it, but soy meal, rice bran, fish meal, corn meal, salt and molasses, or like we have a mineral mix that we use too. Those are some of the components that we might purchase. And then we use actually fermented banana stalks as like a kind of a fiber and somewhat carb source as well. And for the pigs, I think for the chickens we have done that before as well, but mainly for the pigs. And a lot of farmers in northern Thailand will cook banana stalks. That's like pretty common to mix in with your feed. But we think fermenting makes more sense. You don't have to use cooking fuel, and actually it helps with the digestion of pigs. So we're about to do an experiment to kind of compare cooked versus raw versus fermented banana stalks in with our livestock feed. Create more protocols, because we have awesome farm staff that are really great at doing what they do, but they aren't as familiar with research practices. So I'm wanting them to be really comfortable with it. I don't want it to be just like this tedious, and track all this stuff. I want them to feel like, okay, honestly, our farm staff's feedback and opinion is hugely important, because if if they think something's a bad idea, it's probably like farmers in the area would probably also think it's a bad idea. So I involve them at like an early stage, like the planning stage. I sit down with our farm staff and we talk through like potential experiment ideas and like how we would actually carry out the research. And I, work with them to kind of come up with topics that we think are relevant and that are actually something that could be adopted by local farmers or farmers in the region. And yeah, I really enjoy having them be like more involved. So this is kind of a cow barn area that we recently created. So we actually take them out and we will stake them in different parts of the farm and they'll graze on different parts of the farm. So again, I think partly because we're actively using the farm right now, they're chilling in here and we're just doing cut and carry. You can see they've mainly eaten it already, but we'll grow crops that are specific for forage. We'll cut them, we'll bring them in here and feed them. But yeah, we often bring these guys out and graze them. Most days they're out on the farm. We try to create structures that kind of have a combination of natural materials that you could easily get from your area, but also some that are not, just because we need them to last longer. Some of the concrete and the metal is just so that we don't have to replace it every year, but we also want to create systems that are like replicable and where it's kind of like, well, if I wanted to, I could build this completely out of natural materials. Honestly, those guys get out quite a bit. They're usually, I think part of it's that it's the hottest time of the day, so we have them covered in shade. But in the afternoon and the morning, we usually have them out grazing. But yeah, you could, I have a neighbor who just does cut and carry for his cows completely. Yeah, definitely. So yeah, here's actually that drip barrel system that I mentioned. I think I showed a picture of it in the presentation I gave it.
Yeah, that's good.
The Shea thing.
Do you let the cows go over to the fish pond, or that's not?
No, we don't really let them. I mean, we mainly just bring water to them, or we'll have like water basins set out if they're grazing. But this is just drip irrigation for the eggplants that we have growing here. Yeah, so this one we're actually filling the barrel from our ponds, but you could do a rain barrel catch system and then have that be drip directly into your plants as well. So you mentioned Azolla fern. So we basically create these manure liquid, solutions that we grow the water ferns or the duckweed. So yeah, we just kind of make like a low nitrogen solution, just adding a little bit of manure in with the water, and that's acting like a feed source or a nutrient source for the plants. So we won't go in here, but this is where we have our deep litter pig pens. Now we have like more strict things in place. You guys found the oranges, huh? The mandarins. So this is kind of our new feed mixing station. So like I said, we recently moved our pig pens and some of our livestock housing areas over here. So now this has become a station that's just meant for us to mix our own feeds. So we produce on-farm feeds in this little area. So looks like they're making a dry mix. Yeah, FFA. No, I mean, you can smell the fish, the fish behind you, but the pigs, it's pretty low smell, right? Like, I wouldn't even know they're pigs. Like, when we walked past before, I was like, man, the pigs are so quiet right now. Yeah, we've got probably maybe like 14 pigs in there right now. Most of them are piglets. We just had a litter delivered. Yep. So we have like a little sanitation tank where we dip our boots before we go in. maybe we'll kind of buzz through the agroforestry and then we'll go straight to the seed bank. So I'd love to do more with the agroforestry. It's kind of one of those things where it's like, it's on the list. But right now we just kind of established this stretch of different trees that are, and shade-loving crops that are relevant for either timber production or construction or for food. So we kind of have a mix and mash little agroforestry strip back here. You can see one of the water canals back here too. So you can see we've got some so this is chaya right here. Chaya is like a really nutrient dense. Yeah, you eat the leaves and the young shoots. It's actually from Mesoamerica originally. It's like Mexico, Central America. But you have to cook the leaves. It's got some trace cyanide in it that the cooking process gets rid of. But it's really nutrient dense. And I think it's got a really good taste. We sometimes call it tree spinach. But I'd say it's milder taste than spinach. And you propagate it like just by cutting, not like the complete green area, but right where there's kind of this transition zone. You can see it's kind of silvery before it gets into a more woody area. Like I would cut that, and then I would trim the leaves off the top, and you just stick it on the ground. It's super hardy, roots quite easily. People will also eat the green part of the stem. Almost like an asparagus kind of, not in taste, but like that's kind of what it reminds me of when they cook the stem.
What is this here?
What do we got here? So we got some kind of old beehives that are not currently in use, but we should probably restock them soon. That'd be cool. This is a fishtail palm. You'll probably see a few of those as we're walking through, but fishtail palm you can eat the shoot of. I'm not gonna know everything that's in here, but I'll tell you what I do know. More fishtail palm. I think we got some rattan. Yeah, I really love like the shade that, just like it's so, like you can just immediately tell the temperature drop. I really like kind of these semi-forested areas. So it's a dry season, so it's not as lush as how it usually looks, but I'm sure you guys are used to that with the dry season yourselves. Yeah, I think there can be some really effective use of trees, especially if you coppice them, where you're just cutting off branches and maybe just taking the top off at certain times of the year. That can be a really good way to provide like a steady source of wood fuel if you need wood fuel. We've also done like living fences by planting things and then coppicing them, and it's kind of like it'll keep growing and create either like fodder for animals. Like we'll often use like something that's nitrogen fixing, like Lucena, but that we can feed the leaves. It does occasionally produce fruit, but not that you'd eat. I think it's more like it occasionally goes to seed. We typically propagate it just by the stem though, and I think this was kind of an irrigation that somebody set up a long time ago. It's got water flowing. We've got some frog raising in here. Oh, they kind of hid, but there's a big one right there. Oh, you can see them. They're kind of hiding right now, but there were a bunch when we came over. Yeah. Yeah. This is one of our staff, actually. This is his personal kind of project. And some of our staff live on the farm. Their housing's to the left. We're gonna go to the right. Yep, mulberry. I think we've got some neem trees in here. There's a little rooster. That's one of the staffs. Yeah, so I mentioned earlier we do most of our seed production in these raised beds. You can see we got fruit trees kind of throughout the farm as well. Some mangoes there. Here, some neem here that we use. We will make like a natural pesticide out of neem leaves and the neem fruit as well. If you guys want, there's a little pergola in here. See some of the beds. So we try to make our raised beds out of different materials to show that people have different options. So you saw some concrete ones earlier. Some of these are made from just strips of bamboo. Some of them are made from roof tiling. Here's some more drip irrigation. Yeah, yeah, I think that's what do they got here? Chinese kale. Yeah, it's pretty popular, and there's some gourds. We also use tobacco as a pesticide on the farm. And yeah, you can see we use different things as mulch. Sometimes like the old corn residue we'll just use as mulch. Often rice straw though. It's like they're about to replant these beds out over here. Yeah, they recently built this whole section, and I thought it was kind of fun that you don't have to make rectangular beds, right?
Yes.
You can make fun shapes, you can make it livable, make it like nice. So you got yard-long bean trellised over here. In the back, we got the purple one back there. Yeah. We do have a keyhole garden back here. Yeah, this is a more recent, one of the more recent additions. Yeah, it's super nice. Again, it's so much cooler in the shade. Really makes sense. Yeah, purple. Yeah, we call it yard-long bean here. So it's like a long, kind of like a long string bean. Sitao? Okay, yeah. You have purple and green too?
I've seen like the purple and
Yeah. Yeah, so it's pretty staple. I like yard-long bean a lot. I like to buy it, eat it. This one is getting thick. So again, this is where, like, you know, legumes are great. Green manure cover crop. They can really.
Yeah, you would tell them, okay, check the soil there.
Yep, exactly. Yeah.
What do you want?
Yeah, you can see in here. It's nice, right? It's pretty nice stuff. So it definitely, and this is probably great too. It's just getting baked in the sun right now, right?
but I'm sure if they plant another.
Yeah. Oh yeah, there's a keyhole garden right there. We've got some little cornfields set up. So, you know, obviously there's an example where we don't have it in structured raised beds, but we've still built those earth mounds. So we still have beds, they just don't have like sides to them. And they still have kind of like ability to drain and ability to concentrate nutrients right where you're growing. This is typically how I grow in my own gardens. I really like kind of these raised mound beds. Okay, and then we'll head back this way. You guys will get a break from the heat because we're gonna go check out the seed bank. So we have Royal Project stations that are set up across Thailand. And I think they saw that garden style, maybe at one of those. And then we have a nursery in here. And then we have kind of a station on the left here where we make potting soil. We got some dragon fruit in here. And then this is kind of like, I think where they sprout coconut seeds. Yeah. Okay, so let's go pop into the seed bank real quick. So I think farm staff or seed bank staff has probably gone to lunch, but we can, so maybe we'll run into Peepaw, maybe we won't. But if you guys have any questions, I can certainly connect you to people at work. So, all right, I guess before we go into the storage rooms, this is, you saw kind of some drying stations out front. We've got a cabinet dryer that I can show you in more detail when we go back out. But typically, once things are dried and cleaned, that's when they come into this point. So we have some germination chambers in the back. So I think I mentioned the vacuum seal system with so this is actually, so there's a bicycle pump that's had the valve flipped.
Yeah.
This is one that they literally created just with PVC tubes. I think this one's pretty slick. And they use like a cutout of like a flip-flop sandal, like a rubber flip-flop, to create the actual vacuum. And then there's a bike or some type of tire inner tube that can create the seal on the outside. So with something like this, you'd press it down and then the rubber on rubber would create a seal. And then you just pump it, and the electrical tape will actually like lift up enough for like air to be pulled out, and then when you push it back down, it pushes it, it seals it back. And then you can do the same with like glass jars, where you see you've got like you have a hole punctured in the metal top, so covered with tape, and then some of these we'll put the electrical tape on afterwards. We'll just put like what's the clear tape, Scotch tape or something during the pumping process, and then we'll use electrical tape at the end. But you do the same thing. It doesn't take that many pumps, yeah, but and you kind of have to, like, you can test it. You know, it takes a little bit of practice in the beginning, and when it's properly sealed, if you lift up the tape, you'll seal the seeds. Basically, like the air rushes back in, so you see the seeds go like, you know. So once you get to that stage and you can repeat it a couple times, then you just kind of, you know, you do it, and when you're confident. We do split seeds into different categories. So there's, I think it's orthodox and recalcitrant. So orthodox seeds are ones that you can store long term. I think if I have the name right, recalcitrant would be like a mango seed, where it's like you can't store long term. It's gonna die. It needs moisture to survive. So you guys can come on in. Yeah, and then close the door after you.
Whoa, nice.
So this is kind of the,
Your office.
yeah, exactly. This is the Wisconsin room. No, I'm just kidding. This is acts as kind of like a buffer chamber for where we store our seeds long term, but this is also where we package seeds into smaller packets. So it's kind of like a functional workroom where okay, you know, we've got the long-term cold storage, but now we're wanting to do something with those seeds. We don't have to like bring it into like a hot setting to work with it. We can bring it in here. They've got scales, they have a vacuum sealer behind you. I think this is kind of like an inventory of small seed packets. So these are the types of packets that if you join like Echo Community, you get like 10, you can select like 10 free sample packets a year. And that allows you to just try different things out on your farm. They're all open pollinated varieties, so you could save those seeds moving forward, or you know, you can get them from us again. We're not really set up like a business, so I'm pretty sure we lose money with our seed banking thing, but that's part of it, right? Like we're just trying to, really the purpose is to help maintain a higher level of agrobiodiversity and to give options for our network to try out. So if they find something that works really well for them, then that gives them, you know, it's not like they dumped a bunch of money into something to see if jack bean was a good option for them. They just got like a, you know, free packet of jack bean. I don't know what shipping's like to the Philippines. Sometimes with islands it can be trickier because there can be more restrictive laws, but we can talk to Peepaw about that. Yeah, so those are larger vacuum sealed packets, which you'll see in the next room. That's how we store most of our seeds long term. And then the way that we actually keep this room cool, so this room's typically set at about 60, or probably 55 to 60, but it went up when we came in. We use what's called a cool bot. So it's this little, these are actually made in, I think these are made in Thailand. You hook it up to your AC unit, any AC unit like this, and it tricks it into thinking it's warmer than it actually is. So you can maintain like a low temperature for a longer period of time. And there's something about it that prevents it from like freezing up too. I don't know, but they're pretty slick. And then we just combine that with spray insulation to maintain that cooler temperature for a longer period of time. The floor also has insulation underneath it. So you can see we also insulate the doors. You guys are getting the tour from the person who's usually behind a computer not giving tours, so hopefully it's sufficient. Hani gives the best tours, but she's preoccupied today. So Patrick gives a pretty solid tour. Yeah, so we have, I think, between 300 and 400 different varieties of seeds. In our catalog, we have about 250 that we offer for people to either buy or to get the free samples from. So you can see most of them are stored in vacuum sealed plastic bags in kind of larger quantities or mid-sized quantities. It's not like these are huge. We open these up to pull seeds out for the smaller packets as needed. And that's also why we have kind of mid-size instead of really large bags, is because we are having to open some of them quite often. So if we can just focus on, you know, a mid-sized bag and then make it through it, then all the other bags that are sealed continue to be stored in optimal conditions. And then we have, you know, accession numbers that we give to every, not just every variety of seed, but every time we grow out something for seed, it gets a new accession number. So that gives like the year and kind of all the relevant information, like where the seed originally came from. I used to work in the seed bank in Florida, but it's been a while since I actively dealt with the seed cataloging system. But we regularly will pull seed to do germination tests on, and then we regularly will grow out seeds either as needed or when, you know, at just regular time intervals. So if the germination rate drops below a certain percentage, then it's a big signal like, hey, we have to grow this out again. And then ideally we're just regularly growing them out anyways. But so really the purpose for our seed bank is to carry seeds that have very specific purposes. We're not trying to be like the biggest seed bank or something like that, or have like the most variety of seeds. It's kind of like we're trying to carry seeds that are relevant to the region, that might be specific to the region, and seeds that fall into different categories. So a category that we would have interest in might be like green manure cover crops. So if it's a nitrogen fixing legume that we can save seeds of, we're going to want to have a sampling of that in our seed bank, especially if it's something that's from the region. Another example would be what we call like neglected and underutilized species. So there are some food crops that just don't get used to the extent that they maybe should, even if they're like well known. Like I'm sure you've heard of millet. Millet's like not super rare necessarily, but it's very its potential is not fully taken advantage of in agriculture systems right now. So millet would be something that we'd promote as a grain. Millet is a food grain, so you could use it for human consumption, you can use it for livestock consumption too. But then we also carry like major crops too, but we want, like corn, but we want to have quite a wide range of varieties that we're carrying, and ones that might have significance again to a particular region. Yeah, heirloom varieties, and I think I mentioned this earlier, but all of our seeds are open pollinated. So what that means is if you plant any of our seeds, you can save those seeds and grow them out yourself in the future, and it'll be true to the plant that you got the seed from. It's not that hybrid seeds are bad, it's just that hybrid seeds, if you grow them out and save the seeds from them and replant those seeds, you'll get a range of expressions of probably the two parent varieties that were used to make the hybrid. It's not going to be consistent. You can, over time, keep saving those seeds and select for good traits. That's something that we call creolization, but it's, you can do that with any seed really. To some extent, your plant's genetics are gonna express different things based on the needs of that plant over its lifetime. So if you're growing a plant in an environment that is very protected, it maybe doesn't have, it's not going to maybe express some of its natural defenses in the same way. That could carry over into future genetic expression. But it's, that's not guaranteed to happen, but I think it is smart, partly also for your own purposes. This is a much more definite way that it would happen. If you're growing out plants and you are not using a lot of pesticides, or maybe you aren't using any pesticides, and you notice that specific plants are a lot healthier and are not getting attacked by insects as much, you'd want to save seeds from that plant, because you're like, well, this plant like naturally has genetics that are like more resilient to pests, right? So I mean, you can think of that in terms of humans too, in your own family. Like my brother is probably like twice the size of me muscle-wise, so like he's better at sports than I am, right? So like we're very different in that sense. That's the type of idea with your plants. You're gonna get like a range even from the same parent plants, that some of them might be really good at a certain thing, or maybe some of them are just like a really good average of like drought tolerant, insect or pest resistant, things like that. So yeah, good fruit, good tasting fruit, things like that are all things you might want to focus on for selection of seed. Yes, so we've got some drying cabinets out here. So I think in the video that I showed you guys, I showed you a small light bulb dryer. This is a larger one. It's a little less complex than the one I showed you, because the one I showed you had fans involved. Oh, this one has fans, they're just on the sides. So the one that I showed you in the presentation had kind of like a airflow chamber on one side of it. This one is, I think they decided that you didn't need to build that complicated of a setup. So in here you still have the light bulbs that can generate heat if you need to. Right now you don't, because it's hot enough outside. And then that hot air is going to flow up, and then we have just ventilation at the top. But a lot of it's just about having a big chamber like this. You're not going to have as much of an issue with airflow anyways. It's gonna have better airflow just because of the size, so. Yep, exactly, and dust. So, yeah, we try to, label things at every step of the way. So we have these cards that you can just, wipe clean with alcohol or ethanol, and then you can fill in the information when you have a new crop that you're harvesting for seed. We got lima bean over here, lab. So lab's another green manure cover crop. Some carrot seed, some eggplants.
Fix that door, bro. It's stressing you out.
And moringa.
We are.
That, I don't know. That's a good question. Ooh, it exploded. You hear that?
It's a seed that will explode.
Oh, yeah, so it's got little seeds inside. Oh, wow, that's kind of fun. So that's, I think, pretty much everything I wanted to show you on the tour. This is Piwa's in here, and she's busy right now, but she's the farm manager. So then this would be more of a protected growing area if we need to prevent cross-pollination, or if something's more pest sensitive to flying pests. Looks like we need to repair some of the patches on it, but yeah, the grapevine's pretty big. It's very cool. And feel free to walk through the beds in here too if you want. So this is more jack bean. Yeah, the big guys. Oh, and I can also point out, this is our earth bag seed storage. So I showed this in the presentation as well as an option for food storage, but you can also, really we designed it as primarily an option for seed storage. So if you come in here, you can feel it. It's like significantly cooler. It's not as cool as obviously, like, maybe it doesn't feel as shocking since we came from the cold room, but like there is a definite drop in temperature. You can see our little display of vacuum sealed seed jars. You can also do the vacuum sealing thing with like a little syringe too. It's not quite as effective, but you can still get some of the air out. Yeah, and they're actually bags that we filled with earth in the core. So I hope that was helpful. And like I said, if you have specific questions, I can connect you to people that work in different parts of the farm.